Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Consumer Engagement in an Omnichannel World. I'm your co-host, Peter V.S. Bond. I'm the Vice President of Retail Strategy at PowerReviews. And as always, I am joined by my co-host. He is an e-commerce industry luminary. He is an entrepreneur. He wears many hats with a tremendous amount of CPG experience working at tiny little companies like PepsiCo and J&J and Revlon. Please join me in welcoming my co-host, Shri Rajgopalan. Shri, how you doing today?
Peter, thank you so much. First of all, I want to wish all our followers and those that are actually watching this video or read this article the best of health. Hopefully we're emerging from this pandemic and life's going to be awesome for everybody. But I wanted to really thank our guest who's joined us today, who Peter's about to introduce in 1 second, because we're trying a new format for the first time. And I'm personally very excited about it. You don't have to watch just Peter and me having a discussion between ourselves about CPG and e-commerce. And we actually have a guest. And how exciting is that, Peter?
Oh, it's really exciting, Shri. And I am very, very happy and pleased to introduce Jon Jessup. Jon is the founder and CEO of a company called Reputation Studio. Now, they've built a platform on top of Salesforce Service Cloud that allows their clients to use this platform to respond to ratings, reviews, and other types of user-generated content across multiple retail platforms and what have you. So I want to really thank Jon and introduce him. Jon, welcome to our show.
Welcome. Yeah, thank you guys. Really appreciate having me on. I really want to take this opportunity to talk about just the power of customer reviews. We're all consumers and we all rely on reviews to make purchasing decisions. We've obviously seen the last couple months just the increased volume of e-commerce and reliance on reading reviews to make purchasing decisions. And so obviously with Amazon and with Walmart and with Target and with owned e-commerce sites, user-generated content and reviews are hugely valuable and really help drive e-commerce sales.
Yeah, Jon, I thank you for that. I can absolutely echo what you're saying. Not only has e-commerce been going up, but the actual content being generated through e-commerce has been explosive. We're seeing that in our data. I'm really excited to learn about what your platform does and why you think it delivers value to brands as they're trying to build and maintain a very positive reputation with consumers. I should let everybody know, for transparency's sake, that Jon and I met last September at the Grocery Shop Conference in Las Vegas. And over the last month and a half, we introduced a new partnership between PowerReviews and Reputation Studio, which allows their clients, who are also our clients, to use the Reputation Studio platform to respond to content that's being generated on the PowerReviews platform. So we're very bullish on this capability. I know some of that will come out in our conversation. So today, Shri and I put together a series of questions for you, and we know you'll have some great answers for us that really get to that. And before I pass off to Shri, I'm just going to remind everybody, if you look at the bottom of the screen here, if you want to follow us on LinkedIn or on YouTube, just go to the hashtag Shri and PVSB. And that's the easiest way to find us on those social media platforms. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Shri. He's got the first question for you, Jon.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Peter. Jon, I'm obviously very intrigued by the name itself, Reputation Studio, because to me that conveys reputation, social conversation brands have with consumers as well as consumers have about brands. But the word studio also rings a bell to me about storytelling back in return. And given what's going on in the last 5-10 years with digital transformation, to me, it's so important that brands engage with consumers online, have the discussion with them, and actually encourage a lot of social conversations. So obviously, Jon, the first question that comes to my mind is, we're in the middle of what is arguably a global pandemic, and things are being bought online in many categories in many countries. 80-90% of all retail is now online. And in that sort of a scenario, why does customer engagement become so important?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for what we're seeing with a lot of our customers, there's a lot of great feedback about our products that we're purchasing, but there's also some negative feedback as well. And so for brands to understand what's going on with their products across multiple markets, multiple channels, there's valuable insights for brands to gain from this information. And there's also global consumer care teams, which I'm sure you know from your past experience, that are in charge of responding to consumers if there's any kind of adverse effect. And again, we're all making purchasing decisions based on this user-generated content. And if there's a negative review and the brand hasn't responded to that, a lot of us consumers are going to sort of just go on to the next product and look for one that doesn't have issues where the brand's actually engaged. The other thing that we've been seeing recently is when you think about share of market, so you've got a certain product that's in a certain category, and let's say it's number 3 on Amazon, the brands that are actually being very successful in terms of gaining additional market share are the ones that are actually engaged with their consumers, and the ones that are not are actually dropping in terms of the consumers, what the consumers think about that product.
That's great. That's very helpful, John. I can tell you, I know from talking to quite a number of brands and also the retailers that sell those brands that increasingly the scores that they're getting are determining how that product is treated on the site. Do they get placement on the site?
Yep.
Are brands getting penalized? So I hear brands very, very focused on, I got to address these bad reviews. So what should brands be doing to address bad or low rated reviews as the terminology?
And John, if I can just append to that question, in
Sure.
addition to what can brands do to address these bad reviews, my humble belief is every review is equally important and the consumer wants to engage, or whoever submitted the review wants to engage.
Yep.
So do you treat the bad ones versus the good ones differently? If you can just build that into your answer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's a great question. So I think it really depends on the product and the category. If there's an adverse effect where like a consumer's taking something either topical like on their face, or they're actually consuming it, and like there actually are FDA requirements, as I'm sure you know, where you actually have to respond within a certain period of time, and there's actually a business process that you have to follow. Obviously, if it's a 5-star review that somebody says they love it or it did wonders for them, you have more time to respond to that. We still believe that you should respond to that, but I think us as consumers, we're constantly reading reviews, making purchasing decisions based on them. But if I see that somebody's, for example, like a pet supply food, if I'm going to give it to my dog and somebody else's dog had major issues with that product and the brand didn't respond to it, I'm definitely not buying it, right? So I mean, the brands have to respond to the negative ones faster. And when you talk about SLAs, I mean, if it's an adverse effect of somebody, consuming or using that product, I mean, 3, 4, or 5 business hours is pretty much like the max. But the problem is for a lot of these brands, they don't have tools to manage, they don't even know that a 1-star review's been written for a day, right? And so I've even seen a lot of brands, their SLA doesn't actually start until when they receive the negative review. But if they don't receive it, then did it not happen? And so, but obviously, if the longer that negative review is out there, and consumers are looking at it, I mean that's definitely going to affect sales.
Yeah, that's great. I know from our data that if you don't respond to a negative review, that person becomes even more vocal. But if you do and you address their needs, they can actually become one of your strongest brand advocates. I think Sheree and I have talked to them about that. The interesting thing about ratings and reviews is the ratings kind of occur after a consumer has conducted a transaction, they bought the product. And while consumers that are looking for other genuine, authentic feedback to help them make their purchase decision, sometimes it's not just a review. Maybe a review doesn't answer the question they have. Talk about questions and answers also as a mechanism that brands really need to pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, Q&A is really interesting. I mean, I've read, in the last 2 years of starting Reputation Studio, I've probably read 10,000 questions that consumers are asking, and it's just really interesting to see what types of questions people have about products. And I've also seen a lot of really bad answers to questions, right? And as I'm sure both of you guys know, Q&A is kind of a social thing that we put into our e-commerce experience. And when, if I were to go ask a question and then Peter, the know-it-all Peter goes in and answers, thinking he's got the right answer, but then Sheree comes along and he's like, why is Peter answering this question incorrectly? Most of the platforms out there, Amazon and Walmart, PowerReviews, they actually they promote that the answer came from the brand. And the brand actually has the ability to comment on somebody else's answer. So there's the ability to sort of have the brand respond to it and be like, hey, that's actually not true. This is actually the facts, right? But I think what's really interesting about Q&A as well is just, it's a common theme across all e-commerce channels now is almost all sites have Q&A now, right? And if there's questions being asked and brands are not answering those questions, then it's kind of like, what's going on, right? Like, do they not care about, answering consumers' questions, right? And so I think answering questions is super important, but it's also a way to fix your content, right? If people have questions about, does this contain this ingredient? There's so many different types of questions that consumers have, right? But it's ways for for brands to understand how can they make the product descriptions better, maybe images. I've seen a lot of examples of like our customers will change the packaging. And so, the packaging's changed now, and the images are changed. And now people are asking questions: Is this still the same product? What's actually changed about the actual product that I'm going to be getting? And so, I think there's just so many amazing, use cases for Q&A, but it's super important for brands to be engaged there as well.
My humble opinion is all of this should be non-negotiable for a brand. I mean, if you look at how much has changed in the last 2.5 decades have been CPG. Reputation was primarily legal or attorney oriented, and a brand, if it was like an absolute adverse event that somebody put an ad out in a newspaper complaining about something, class action lawsuits. Now it requires one consumer and one review to change the game completely. And I feel the reason why brands struggle with this and are in dire need of help with folks like yourself and Reputation Studio is the ecosystems brands have aren't built for answering every single consumer. And the focus on marketing traditionally has always been mass marketing, like emotional based mass marketing. And so has the follow through with consumers in many ways. So, one of the things I feel strongly about is brands struggle with this because things are sold, their brands are actually sold on so many diverse channels. It could be B2B, B2B2C, B2B2B, could be B2C, could be via a retailer to a consumer at a pickup point, could be click and collect, just plethora of ways, or just even direct to consumer. So what are all these various channels that a brand should be monitoring and respond to? Do you address all of them? Do you cherry pick? Is it like the top 5%? Like, how do you actually get a good grip on this?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we really so about 2 years ago, we started with Amazon because that's what we were hearing from most of our customers was like the most important, but also the most challenging channel. And if you think about Amazon, there's 18 Amazon sites globally. So all through Europe, in Japan, even down in Mexico, Canada. And so, but managing Amazon is very difficult from a ratings and reviews and Q&A perspective. But to answer your question in terms of channels, we're constantly listening to our customers in terms of what channels are they having challenges in. Like Flipkart in India has been a really interesting one that we've added for the past couple of months because of customers, seeing a lot of review volume there. And I think the right way to look at it is volume. Like how many reviews are being posted on those channels where there's actually recent reviews, right? We do have customers that come to us and they're like, hey, like, what about this review channel over here? And I look and there hasn't been a review posted on there for 2 years, right?
Oh, gosh.
So I'm like, there's no point in looking at that channel because consumers aren't really there. But I think it's also in terms of countries, right? Like there's a lot of e-commerce sites that I've learned of over the past 2 years that I had never heard of, right? Like there's Lazada and Shopee in like Singapore. Obviously, we're all familiar with Tmall. The review volume on Tmall is insane. I saw yesterday with one of our clients, they had like 4,000 comments on a product in one day on Tmall. Wow. So the consumers are super, focused on it. There was a lot of negative stuff being said too, like, so that's crazy. But going back to PowerReviews too, I mean, a lot of these brands that we're working with, they have, they have 40, 50 brands they have to manage. And I mean, as you guys both know, the e-commerce teams are typically the ones that are in charge of like the UGC strategy, but they're not the ones that are like, that know the details of a particular product that's under a certain brand, right? And so one of our big strategies is getting the digital capabilities in the hands of the people that actually know the answers, and that are actually judged, like their performance of their job is managing customer and consumer engagement. And so that's honestly what I love most about helping these companies like achieve digital sort of capabilities that they've never had before, is getting the information in the hands of the people that are actually in charge of that part of it, right? And the other thing I've seen too is there's a lot of these companies that use BPOs, and they'll use a BPO in a certain, if you're not familiar with BPO, it's a business process outsourcing, but they'll use a certain BPO in certain regions, right? So they might have a BPO in Europe, and that BPO speaks German and Italian and French. They might have a BPO in the US that's managing Canada and North America. And what's good about a BPO is they have the ability to scale up their resources quickly, right? And so, there's two ways to streamline a business process, right? One's with technology, the other one's with actual process, right? And so what the BPOs have is they have the ability to add more bodies to something, right? And so I think that's kind of the key, is being able to sort of outsource certain aspects of it, but also have the brand still have visibility over what's going on across these channels, and being able to track SLAs and know how they're doing when it comes to response.
Okay. Yeah, before we get into the next question, one of the things that came to my mind as you were describing Tmall and you were describing Flipkart was, does Reputation Studio handle multiple languages and language translation? Because I got to imagine not every review is in English.
Yep. Yeah. So translation's been a huge thing for us. And it's actually been so and I'm actually kind of shocked, but the Salesforce ecosystem, which I've been a part of for like 15 years, doesn't really handle translation well. So we actually had to build our own translation capabilities, and we've actually just started doing that as just a core feature as well, right? So because if you think about a call center, like an email comes in, or a web chat, or like a web form post, and that's in German, and the corporate offices in New Jersey, like I don't speak German, right? And so translating that from German into English, so the corporate can understand what's going on. Also, a lot of the AI tools, like the sentiment and intent tools, don't actually handle multi-language very well. And so what we've done is, in terms of, we'll translate like a review or a question into English, and then run the analysis against it. Google and Microsoft, their translation capabilities are pretty amazing now. And it's also very inexpensive, right? To translate 50,000 reviews is like $500. Whereas before in the past, like it would be pretty expensive to actually translate that with good quality.
Well, that's actually excellent to lead into the next question I had. Let's flip the lens. We've been talking more about the brand's expectation to respond to the customers. From your research, what do customers expect from a timeliness of response to content or feedback that they've shared with brands?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on the channel and the type of product that you're on. What we see is, consumers really want to know that they've been heard, and they'll typically give a company a day or two to respond to them, and then most of them will kind of write you off after that. And so I think from a response speed, definitely responding quickly is key, but definitely responding to those negative ones quickly. But I don't know. It's I can be kind of curious, like your feedback or Sri's on that. Like, is you as a consumer, like if you were, I assume you guys write reviews. Like, how fast do you expect a response?
Personally, for me, because I'm in the e-commerce space and I've been an e-commerce leader for very large brands. For me, anything more than 24 hours is just I feel like it's an offense to the consumer. It's just wrong.
Yep.
You're offending the consumer.
You're much more patient than I am, Sri, especially when it comes to other forms of feedback and what have you. If I've got a problem with an airline and I'll send them a message through through direct message and Twitter, I want them to respond back to me within minutes. But yeah, for ratings and reviews, I'm probably a little bit more tolerant. But yeah, 24 hours to me is at least a business day. You know, if I send something on a Saturday, I think I'm realistically understanding I'm not going to get a response until Monday. But that's usually what I want. But
I think it's also kind of interesting, right? Like, you know, there's been a lot said around, you know, 1-day delivery, right? You could order something today and it's there tomorrow, but then we have the same, like, and that you're actually like putting something in a box and shipping it to somebody.
Yeah.
And we have the same expectation that if I'm not happy, they have the same amount of time that it took me to get the product to them to have the brand actually respond to them, right? It almost seems like the faster the fulfillment gets, the faster our responses should be.
You bet.
Yeah.
So John, what comes to my mind is we just had a short conversation here about how brands have to respond within a certain time period, which is dynamically evolving. I said 24 hours. Peter said as fast as possible. Consumers are reasonable, I think, for the most part, in understanding weekends and time zones and things of that nature. But just before that, we also talked about the number of platforms a brand can be in. Therefore, if you wear a brand lens and it's about a SKU, you probably are overwhelmed as a brand manager with the amount of responses you got to get out there and the speed and dynamism with which you got to get out there. So are there like any specific technologies, automation that can help a brand do this quickly and dynamically so they can keep up with the space and also make sure that it actually helps them talk to every consumer who does want to engage with them?
Yep. No, 100%. And I mean, the first thing is just consolidation. You've got to figure all the channels that you care about. And I would argue that all of the channels are important, but consolidate everything into one platform. And there's definitely a lot of automation you can do in terms of routing it to the right people. And so we had talked about, you might have a company that has 40 brands, making sure that, if you've got, a team that knows that a certain particular brand really well, like automatically routing those to them. And also tracking SLA, right? I mean, say you come in the morning and there's 100 reviews that you need to respond to that morning, making sure that they know that these are the older ones and these are the newer ones. And so being able to sort based on that, that's huge. Also, like, response templates are really helpful. And having the response templates be channel specific and rating specific. So you can have a Lysol 1-star review template. And this is where the AI piece comes in too, is if we know that it's a 1-star review about the scent, we can sort of filter down. You might have 100, templated responses for a brand, but you can, based on the context and what the consumer sentiment and intent is of the review, you can sort of narrow it down to, this is a negative review about the scent. Here's 4 or 5 things that, we might say with our brand voice around if people are complaining about the scent. Same thing if if a 5-star review and people love the scent, you could be like, based on your brand message and your brand voice, a lot of these brands have playbooks as well. So they'll put into place playbooks so that when you join as a consumer care agent with that brand, how we talk as a brand. Approvals are one of the other things that come up a lot.
I think what you're alluding to, and which actually scares me a little bit, and I'd love for you to address that as you complete this response, is given the volume of reviews, it sounds like you're alluding to automation of responses or automating responses by CSRs. And that to me sounds actually scary because I feel it's very robotic, like an Autobot in nature.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm definitely not talking about automated responses. I'm talking about using technology to assist the agent, right? The agent, a human is going to have to read that review. But if I'm an agent and I've got 100 different things that I might choose from, it's too much information. And so it's about guiding the agent down the path so that they can answer the customer quickly and efficiently, right? The other big thing is that, we talked earlier about adverse effects. A lot of brands actually want you to call them and they want to give you a reference number. The last thing you want to do is provide like an incorrect phone number or have to like copy paste things from some other systems or something, right? And so like just simple automation like that is hugely valuable. The one area where I would say automation is actually really helpful, and I think totally cool, is if somebody were just to give you a 5-star review but not say anything, or write a 1-star review but not say anything. I think the brand is okay, like they're saying thank you for the 5-star review. I mean, there's not really anything like additional context that I can tell from that. Or if and this actually happens a lot on Google. You can actually rate like a company with a 1-star review but not say anything. And so the brand could say, hey, like, we're sorry that we didn't meet your expectations. Can you please like let us know more information, right? And I've even seen, I mean, you don't need a human being to go respond to a 1-star review when there's no context, right? But I totally agree with you. You don't want to let AI bots start, managing your brand for you. That could probably turn out pretty bad.
What I do hear from you is that in certain isolated instances, it is perfectly okay to automate a response, especially the example you gave of an kind of incomplete review where you get a 1-star, but there's no logic, rhyme, or reason, there's no explanation. That makes all the sense in the world, because you have to actually dig out and get more information. Yep. So in reviewing what Reputation Studios does, I do have a question related to software. And having a reputation management platform built on the Salesforce Cloud platform, game changing for a brand? What do you think, and also why?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think it is. A lot of the global brands that we're working with, they're undergoing some massive like digital transformation strategies, and it's not just about ratings and reviews. It's about their call center. It's about how they're
customer service.
Yeah, well, customer service, but also marketing, right? They're trying to figure out who their consumer is. They're also trying to understand who their competition is. And so really, I mean, consumer insights and also too, like they want to bring new products to market that are innovative, and they want to capture more market share. And so digital capabilities, I mean, it spans commerce, it spans customer service, it spans marketing. I've seen a lot of brands recently taking 5-star reviews and actually using that in their marketing content. I mean, I'm sure we've seen TV commercials where they're taking the reviews of a product and plugging it right into into their ads, right?
The smart ones are doing it for sure.
Yeah, but definitely Salesforce has been, I'm definitely a Salesforce fanboy, but it's been the platform that we're seeing that most global brands are choosing for this digital transformation effort. I would say in the mid-market, we're like from a customer service perspective, we are seeing a little bit of Zendesk, and we are building a version of Rep Studio that will work with Zendesk. And then, but again, it's not, people aren't doing digital transformation on Zendesk, right? They're supporting customers on Zendesk. But global brands are looking for, what's this competitive edge and competitive angle that I can do across my own e-commerce, which obviously helps me understand who my customer is. But you can't ignore Walmart and Target and Amazon. I mean, those are massive channels globally for most brands.
Yeah. Jon, one of the things you mentioned was how brands are using ratings and reviews beyond the traditional placement on a PDP. Examples, it's hard for me to scroll through Instagram without seeing 1 or 2 ads that highlight the star rating. Amazon pretty much has them on every ad they place on Instagram. And then I see them in retail. I saw NYX put on the top of their corrugated cardboard display, scored 4.5 out of 5 stars on Target.com. So yeah, everybody's using it to really try to build authenticity into how they communicate with customers, regardless of whether they're in a physical store or in a digital environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I hear you talking a lot about a really great platform and really great technology and to enable processes, but what comes with that is the ability to actually measure how effective it is. So analytics, that's kind of where I come from. I'd sure love to know, what can brands learn about customer experience and engagement from analyzing and aggregating all this data that's kind of coming through this platform?
Yeah, and I mean, it's these are like very. I mean, I'm having these conversations every single day with brands, and it's really fun because it's. I'm not historically an analytics guy, but I'm becoming one. And there's a lot of great analytics tools out there. And a lot of these companies already have some kind of analytics tool or BI tool, but they don't have the sort of knowledge and expertise to figure out how to really analyze the sentiment and intent of a consumer. And also a lot of it's geographical, like, and regional. And we talked about language earlier, right? You've got reviews that are in Japanese, and you've got a product that does really well in the US, but not doing well in Japan. Why is that? And so I think the biggest thing is, having all this data and analyzing the data is great, but it's got to be actionable, right? What can the brands do with this data to make their products better, right? To market their products to the right consumer, right? And so that's really what we're working on is, and I think, Sri, you've talked about this in the past, and some of this content I've read around you is like predictive, right? It doesn't really matter. It matters what's happened in the past, but it's really about what's going to happen in the future, right? And so that's really where like predictive analytics are going, is, and also trending, right? If you have a product that was a 3.9 and you've started engaging with the reviews, responding, and now it's a 4.3, that's a great trend, right? But if you're on the opposite side of that, and you were a 4.4 and now you changed a couple things in the product and now it's a 3.9, like you're going to be feeling the hurt on that pretty quickly.
As I hear you say that, John, totally ad lib over here. I'm thinking about how unprepared brands are for like ratings and reviews and reputation analytics.
Yep.
Literally coming out of like FAQs, coming out of Q&A, coming out of like actual star ratings versus the language translation of what's in it. To me, traditionally for brands, what all of this analytics has been about predicting and passes Nielsen data or era data. No offense to anybody, but it's fascinating the things that a brand has to think through to stay elite. And maybe that's the reason why all the little brands are slowly eroding away at categories.
Yep. I think there's definitely some truth in that for sure. But also too, a lot of the little guys don't have the digital capabilities either, right? I was actually just reading, are you guys familiar with Salimo? It's the Amazon brand for
Absolutely.
Like,
and healthcare and everything. Yep, sure.
But the reviews are terrible. And you would think that, Amazon could figure out, how to take some of the data they have access to, but they're not in that case. And so if you look at consumer sentiment and intent of the Salimo brand, not so good.
Yeah, I just completed an analysis of the men's shaving category at Amazon. And what you just said about Salimo was they were miles apart from the major national brands in terms of their average star rating. It's interesting. They had the longest reviews of all the brands, but that was because people had the most to talk about because they weren't happy with the brand.
Yeah.
So that's
I think the other thing that's really interesting in analytics that we're seeing and having conversations with our customers about is especially with COVID and with out of stocks. Let's say you're normally a customer of one brand, but that brand was out of stock and you weren't able to buy it. You actually had to buy the competitive product, and it turns out you actually like the competitor's product better than the original product you used to be using, or vice versa. You were forced to buy the competitors and you realize how bad it is. And so one thing we're seeing in the reviews is a lot of comparison happening because consumers weren't able to buy the product that they thought they wanted, right? And so one thing we're doing now in the analytics is like looking for references to competitive products or references of your product in your competitors' reviews, and then helping you figure out, like, are you losing customers? And if you are, why, right? Is it because they have a feature that you have, or there's something about the competitor's product that consumers like more than your product?
Yeah. John, this is great. I have one last question for you. Yep. Let's assume a brand has invested in something like Reputation Studio and has built the infrastructure to kind of do this. What are they doing to ensure that they are making the most of all of these capabilities to actually turn it around and go from a 3.5 to a 4.4 average star rating? What are the other practices they need to put in place to make this work?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the stuff we've already talked about. But sort of, to sort of recap it, it's, it's consolidating, it's doing some good analysis on it. And, understanding is it a problem with my product? Is it a problem with my content? Obviously fixing content is a lot easier than fixing your product. But also getting R&D involved. And I mean, one of my favorite, lines is, the best way to have a 5-star review is to have a 5-star review, right? Or to have a 5-star product.
Yeah.
Hey, brands, please listen to Jon.
Yeah.
You say that one more time, please. That's like honey.
Yeah. And so, but it's funny, like when R&D is not involved with the consumer engagement, it kind of blows my mind, right? It's like,
travesty.
These are the guys that are in charge of making the product. And if they're not listening to what consumers are saying, I just read some kind of high level information for a big global brand that we know. And they said they meet monthly to review consumer sentiment. I'm like once a month is like how the best you guys can do to like figure out, what's going on with
changing every day.
And so, I mean, I would say, probably twice a week we should be meeting and figuring out what's going on. Are there things we can do to tweak certain things? And a lot of it's customer expectations, right? Like if you have a $30 item and the expectations are that it's a good product, not a great product, consumers are like, okay, like, I'm buying the cheaper version of this, right? But I don't know, and I think the other big thing is just the AI aspects of this. I think we're in the infancy of what AI is going to be able to do for brands, because we talk about speed of response, we talk about routing to the right teams, but we also talk about understanding what's going on, and are there any like issues that are popping up that we can quickly squash, and then also too, as brands bring new product to market, what are the things that they can do based on historical to make sure that new product they're bringing to market is going to be successful? Because if I were to launch a new product in the first 30 days, it's a 4.8. Like, I mean, that's a game changer for brands, right? I mean, that product's going to skyrocket from, an unknown product to one of the top products on Amazon or Walmart, assuming that it can get some volume, because review volume is also key.
Hey, Jon, just listening to you speak, I think you mentioned earlier about the difference in reputation management on Walmart versus a Target versus a Amazon, where Amazon is its own ecosystem, but the others tend to be syndicated reviews. I'd love to invite you to come back to us and chat at a later episode, perhaps, on how different is reputation management across retail, including your own D2C.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that.
Well, Jon, thank you for joining us today. This has been a very illuminating conversation. I know Sri and I
thank you.
Thank you guys.
Appreciated your feedback. It's a different angle to how we've been talking about customer feedback, and it's a great example of how brands really need to be thinking about investing in constantly responding to and cultivating the reputation that they have with their customers, because it's gonna have a positive or a negative impact on sales depending on which way you're going to invest your efforts.
Yep.
It's been a great show today. I want to thank everyone for joining us. And as I always do at the beginning and the end of the show, I remind them, if you want to learn more about what we're talking about, just follow the little hashtag at the bottom of the screen here. Hashtag Shri and PVSB on LinkedIn and on YouTube. You can find our content. So, Jon, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jon.
Shri, as always, thank you. And we'll look forward to getting back together with our followers in the next episode. Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.